The bells of San Rufino should have sounded like comfort. In Assisi, they always had. They were the voice of mornings, the rhythm of bread ovens and market stalls, the song that told tired men their labor meant something. But that night, the bells sounded like a question no one wanted to answer. A thin rain had fallen all afternoon, leaving the stones slick and dark. Lantern lights smeared across the streets as people hurried home with baskets pulled close to their chests. Most doors were already shut. Most fires already lit. The town wanted warmth and certainty. Francis walked through it anyway. He moved without hurry, barefoot as always, his robe damp at the hem, the cord at his waist pulled tight. Brother Leo followed a few paces behind, hood up, trying not to slip on the stones. "Brother," Leo said softly, "it's late. The people are tired. Even the priest asked you to speak tomorrow." Francis stopped under the arch of a low stone passage. He lifted his face slightly, as if listening beyond the rain. "Tomorrow," Francis murmured, "the same hearts will say, 'Not yet.'" Leo blinked. "Not yet." Francis turned, and in the lanternlight his eyes looked older than his years, gentle, but sharpened by something heavy. "The most common way souls are lost is not in one great fall," Francis said. "It is in 1,000 small delays." They reached the edge of the square where the last merchants were packing cloth and olives into crates. A man laughed too loudly near the fountain, as if laughter could outshout his own emptiness. Another man argued over a coin so small it could barely buy salt. A woman carried a sleeping child, whispering prayers with the same mouth that had spoken harsh words at noon. And in the middle of it, like a quiet flame that refused to die, stood the church. Inside, the air smelled of wet wool, incense, and old stone. Candles flickered in drafts that slipped through the cracks. A few villagers knelt, heads bowed, shoulders hunched as if prayer were a burden instead of breath. Francis stepped forward, and people began to notice. A murmur moved through the nave like wind through wheat. "He's here," someone whispered. "Why tonight?" another asked. "Does he know something?" a third voice said, almost afraid of its own words. Francis climbed the small steps near the lectern. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't demand silence. He simply looked at them, at the faces that had known hunger, pride, grief, and joy, and his voice came out calm, almost tender. "My brothers," he said, "tell me, how does a soul die while the body still breathes?" No one answered. A child shifted in the back. A candle snapped softly. Francis leaned forward, and the question hung there, heavy as the rain outside. "Because tonight," he continued, "I must speak about the prayer no one dares to pray, and the yes no one realizes they are refusing." He paused, and his gaze fell on a man standing near a pillar, half in shadow, well-dressed, clean-shaven, respected in the market, the kind of man who always smiled at the right times. The man's name was Tommaso. And Francis looked at him as if he could see the exact moment a heart begins to turn cold. Tommaso swallowed hard, though no one had said his name. And somewhere in the dark beams above, a gust moved through the rafters like a sigh, so faint it could have been imagination, or warning. Francis did not point. He did not accuse. He simply held Tommaso in his gaze long enough that the man felt exposed, not shamed, but uncovered, like a wound brushed by air. "Tommaso," Francis said gently, finally speaking the name aloud. A ripple passed through the nave. Tommaso stiffened. He was not a sinner in any way that drew whispers. He paid his tithe. He fed beggars when others were watching. He confessed often enough to feel clean. "Yes, Father," he answered, forcing calm into his voice. Francis descended one step, then another, until he stood level with the people. Tell me, he asked, when the Lord first stirred your heart, when you felt him ask more of you, what did you say? Tommaso hesitated. His mind raced backward, a moment years ago, kneeling where he now stood, feeling a strange heat in his chest, a pull toward generosity that frightened him. I said, soon, Tommaso replied. Francis nodded, as if he had expected nothing else. And when he asked again? I said, when my business was stable. And when it was stable? Tommaso's jaw tightened. When my family was secure. A few heads turned now. The answers were too familiar. Francis's voice softened. And when your family was secure? Tommaso did not answer. Francis let the silence do the work. My brothers and sisters, Francis said, lifting his eyes to the room, hell is not filled only with those who hated God. It is filled with those who postponed him. A murmur rose, uneasy, defensive. You think delay is harmless, Francis continued. You think it is neutral. But every later trains the heart to say no, without ever forming the word. Tommaso felt his chest tighten. He wanted to argue. He wanted to say he meant well. That he believed. That he would give more one day. Francis turned back to him. Do you love God, Tommaso? Yes, he said quickly. Then why does your life sound like a negotiation? The words landed with quiet force. Francis straightened, his voice carrying now, not loud but unmistakably clear. The enemy does not need your rebellion, he said. Only your delay. He does not whisper, deny God. He whispers, not yet. The candles flickered violently, as if a wind had passed through them all at once. In a vision, Francis said, I saw souls standing at the threshold of heaven, hands full of good intentions, mouths full of unfinished prayers. And they said, Lord, we were almost ready. He closed his eyes. And the door remained closed, not because God is cruel, but because love cannot be entered halfway. Tommaso's knees trembled. He felt something slipping, no, something breaking open. All the small refusals he had wrapped in reason suddenly stood naked and unmistakable. Francis opened his eyes again. Tonight, he said, the Lord asks nothing dramatic. Only this, stop saying later. The rain outside intensified, drumming against the stone like a heartbeat. Because the most common way souls are lost, Francis finished, is not that they choose darkness, but that they choose comfort over surrender, again and again, until the choice is no longer theirs to make. And in the silence that followed, Tommaso understood with sudden terror that this night was not a warning meant for someday. It was a final mercy meant for now. The silence did not break when Francis finished speaking. It settled. Heavy. Watchful. No one moved. Even the restless child in the back had gone still, as if something older than fear had entered the room and demanded attention. Then Tommaso sank to his knees. The sound of it, cloth against stone, echoed louder than any shout. I didn't mean to refuse him, Tommaso said, his voice unsteady. I thought I had time. Francis stepped toward him at once. So did they, he said quietly. Who? Someone whispered. Francis did not answer immediately. His face had changed, not hardened, but shadowed, as if he were remembering something he wished he could forget. When the Lord showed me the truth, Francis said, he did not show me flames first. He showed me rooms. Rooms? Brother Leo repeated softly. Yes, Francis said. Lives built carefully. Respectable lives. Clean hands. Calm prayers. Doors locked from the inside. A shiver moved through the congregation. I saw souls sitting beside their fires, Francis continued, telling themselves they would rise soon. That they would go out when the weather was better. When the hour was clearer. Tommaso pressed his palms into the stone. And did they? Francis looked down at him. No, he said. Because comfort dulls urgency. And urgency is the language of repentance. The candles dimmed again, though no wind passed. There comes a moment, Francis said, his voice low, when the heart no longer resists God, because it no longer hears him. A woman near the aisle covered her mouth. Grace is offered again and again, Francis went on. But every refusal, every delay, thickens the soul. Like wax poured into the ears. Slowly. Kindly. Without pain. Tommaso shook his head. I never said no. Francis knelt beside him. You did, he said gently. Just never out loud. Francis placed 2 fingers against Tommaso's chest. The Lord showed me the most frightening prayer, he said. It is not, I hate you. It is, later. Tommaso's breath broke. Tears struck the stone, dark and sudden. What do I do? He asked. Francis did not answer right away. He looked across the room, at every face, at every small, quiet bargain made with heaven. Do not promise tomorrow, Francis said at last. Choose now. Because the door does not close loudly. It closes slowly, while you are still convincing yourself it remains open. A deep bell rang then, too deep for the tower, too early for the hour. And every soul in the church felt it in their bones. Not as threat. But as time passing. The bell's echo faded, but no one moved. It was Tommaso who broke first, not with words, but with action. He rose from the stone floor, trembling, and without looking at anyone, removed the heavy purse from his belt. Coins spilled across the nave, ringing sharply as they struck the ground. Gasps rippled through the church. I won't carry this anymore, Tommaso said, his voice hoarse. Not as an excuse. Not as a shield. Francis watched him with something like relief. One by one, others shifted. A woman stood and walked to the altar, tears streaking her face. A man stepped away from the shadows. Head bowed. Knees touched stone. Hands unclenched. Quiet confessions rose, not loud, not dramatic, but real. Francis did not orchestrate it. He stepped back. Because this was the moment he had seen in the vision, the fork in the road where delay either tightened its grip, or finally loosened. When the last candle burned low, Francis spoke once more. Remember this night, he said. Not because fear found you here, but because mercy did. The rain outside had stopped. The doors of the church opened, and cool air swept through the nave. Dawn was still hours away, yet something unmistakable had shifted. People left quietly. Changed, though not all would admit it yet. Tommaso lingered until the end. Thank you, he said to Francis, his voice barely above a breath. Francis shook his head. Do not thank me, he replied. Thank God, and do not ask him to wait again. Later, long after the church emptied, Brother Leo found Francis alone near the altar. Did the vision end as you hoped? Leo asked. Francis looked at the extinguished candles. No, he said softly. It ended as it always does. And how is that? With a choice, Francis replied. Still burning. Saint Francis did not warn about monsters. He warned about comfort. He warned about the quiet, reasonable voice that says not yet, the voice that never sounds dangerous, never feels rebellious, and never rushes you. Because most souls are not lost in moments of hatred or defiance. They are lost in warm rooms. In good intentions. In prayers postponed. In love delayed until it becomes unfamiliar. The most dangerous words a soul can say are not, I don't believe. They are. Tomorrow. If this story unsettled you, it was meant to. Not to frighten you, but to wake you. Because the door is still open. The voice is still calling. And this moment is still yours. Just don't ask it to wait.